So you talked about Dr. Lawrence Faulkner, right? Where you said here is a doctor who could have as well been an engineer, and at some point in time you talked about uh, you know uh, really managing quality. So walk me through what was the learning when you started working with Dr. Lawrence Faulkner, and how did you incorporate that learning into many of the system design principles that you started putting? Because what I really know is BMT Plus is probably one of the world's first systems to manage thalassemia. And the fact that what did you learn there, and how did you then make it user centric?
So, Dr. Lawrence Faulkner happened to be attending a wedding in Madurai, and for which he was crossing Bangalore. And he had a flight the next morning, so he was staying in a hotel in next to the airport. And somebody introduced us to him, saying, "There's a doctor from Italy who knows a lot about thalassemia. You guys speak about thalassemia. Why don't you go and meet him?" So that dinner conversation is what we call now love at first sight. He liked us, we liked him, and he decided to come to one of our daycares. Now, this daycare was in a government hospital with a lot of restrictions and limitations, as you can imagine. Nevertheless, this daycare center was using high health tech to deliver very basic treatment. So, all that it was doing is crunching data on patients' past history to decide what should be the next treatment steps. When Dr. Faulkner looked at it, he had big ideas in mind and he started conversing with us. Bone marrow transplantation is one of the most critical medical procedures. Unlike a surgery which lasts for a couple of hours, here there is a life at risk for several weeks. The patient is immunocompromised, and for a long period of time, you have to look and anticipate a lot of problems and try and avoid them. So, he is the global specialist for transplantation in thalassemias. And at that time, he was very keen to bring this first world procedure to countries like ours. Of course, we already had some transplantation centers working, but for thalassemia at that point in time, still many patients were actually traveling to Europe to get a transplant. And that was because of cost, it was because of outcomes, several different factors. So, the principles that he made us understand was that the outcome does not necessarily depend upon how qualified and competent your doctor is. The outcome depends upon those hundreds and thousands of small transactions that happen with the patient on a daily basis. Every single time a drug is delivered to a BMT patient, if that drug is not delivered right, the patient can get infected with an antibiotic resistant bug and die. So he switched the table around. From when we think of complicated procedures, high end stuff, we think about experts. He switched the table around and really drove the idea that it is really the entire care mapping which really matters. And having seen this system being used in a daycare, he inspired us and guided us into working on BMT Plus. How BMT Plus differs when it comes to treatment planning is that, first of all, even with the initial few organizations where we were able to create a clinic which was practically paper free. He loves to joke that the only place where a paper belongs in a bone marrow transplant unit is probably the toilet. So now what happens when you make the system completely electronic? When the housekeeping, nurse, and the doctor, everybody is using an electronic system. So immediately there's transparency. Immediately there's enhanced communication. But most importantly, each role has a stake in the outcome. So BMT Plus was designed not for the sophisticated procedure to be done. It was designed to make sure that hydration is well managed while the patient is inside the hospital, that each drug is being taken care of well, that the nurses are able to make sure that in a busy shift, when there are so many things to do, they are getting assistance in prioritizing what matters over the other things. The housekeeping is able to understand what is the priority for the day if I have a patient who has a very infectious condition on the floor. So it was a completely different approach, ground upwards, ensuring that every single component of care finds its rightful place on the technology space. And thereby, you first strengthen the base and then move upwards to the degree that immediately in front of you, you are able to go from seeing the ins and outs, how much of tea somebody has made a couple of hours back, to be able to do outcome analysis. That whole spectrum from bottom to top is something that we built as part of one single platform available through any internet available, any internet enabled device. That's what was a very unique experience, uh, and where his uh, his drive and his understanding of what actually mattered helped us design a system which actually then went on to solve problems for a large number of organizations.